Hello and welcome everyone to GGP's wonderful stream. I'm here with Emmett Nahil from Perfect Garbage. You are the narrative director, writer, game designer behind Love Shore. This is a great game. I've seen it a number of places. I've kept an eye on this for quite some time. I love the look. I love the characters, but obviously that's just me. Why don't you introduce this game to everyone out there?
Sure. Hey y'all. Glad to be here. You mentioned it. I mean, I'm the narrative director, lead, and also a co-writer. I'm not the sole writer, thank God. I work with my co-founder Sanem on a lot of the writing projects that we do. But yes, we're working on finishing up Love Shore, which is our debut game from the studio. It's sort of a narrative, interactive fiction, visual novel, dating sim, any and all of those words apply. Set in a sort of far future cyberpunk, maybe dystopia. And it features two main protagonists, Farah and Sam, who are your two sort of playable characters as they travel through the city and find out all the mysteries therein.
So it's like there's so much to this story already. Like there's there so as I've been like picking up bits and pieces of it, there are humans in this world, but then there are people that are not quite human. Can you talk a little bit about the not quite human people that are in this world as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's sort of three different types of folks in Love Shore.
Love it.
There's regular good old fashioned humans. There's gods who are sort of working in the criminal underworld in Love Shore. And then there are S humans, which are sort of our version of cyborgs. They're synthetically made humans because above all else, we are world building nerds at Perfect Garbage, and we love talking about like transhumanism and sort of how to occupy a body in the future and all that kind of stuff, with a little bit of a dose of sort of like fuck Jeff Bezos in there as well. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss
No,
on
no, no.
this.
It's perfectly fine. It is okay. You're in the right audience for these sort of things, so don't worry about it. But that is no. But that's incredible. And who are you playing as? Which one of these sort of classes are you getting to be a part of in this game?
Yeah, so essentially you can play as Farah or Sam, as I mentioned, and they're both as humans. They are both sort of these cyborg characters who have basically met each other because they were both locked in jail together,
Whoa.
and that's how they first met. However, their storylines sort of diverge from there. They know each other after prison. They both get out and are sort of pursuing their different relationships through the city, and are solving very different mysteries that, in some interesting ways, definitely intersect with each other as you go.
So, sort of visual novel, but we're looking at mysteries. We're looking at like it seems like there's this huge world that we're getting into. I think we got to talk about also the other big thing. We got to talk about the love and the love shore. Like, what are the relationships like in this game? Like, what is sexuality in the future?
I mean, so our number one sort of guide when creating Love Shore is just that the future is queer.
Finally.
As if it's not right now. But
True. Sorry. Take that all back. Present is queer. Anyone else who disagrees is not there yet.
so essentially, we, as a very the majority of the folks in the studio are LGBTQ. I myself am a queer trans man. So it's just something that is just automatic to us when it comes to writing and creative narratives. But that being said, as much as Love Shore is sort of a noir, and there's a lot of mystery in there as well, we also do really like to focus, like you mentioned, on like the relationships and sort of the interpersonal stuff that goes on. In general terms, each character has different sort of companions that you can go along with as you sort of follow their storylines. We really wanted to keep it as inclusive as we could in these romances. So there's options in all of your companion routes to sort of just stay friends, which we don't use as like a barrier to content or anything like that. But we realize that like sometimes if you're playing a visual novel and you're Ace or Arrow, you might be sort of cut off from a lot of story options. So we didn't want to do that. We have sort of smooching and non-smooching scenes that you can opt in and out of. Because we really did want to prioritize the character dynamics and the story first and foremost.
I love it. I love that it's it's a choice. Like you're giving players, like again, it's a story. It is play the way you want. You get the choice to go in it, in however you see fit. This is again, if you haven't already seen Love Shore, if you haven't already like I've seen you in events, demos. It is absolutely beautiful, and I am very much looking forward to this when it comes out. But before all of that, I want to talk a little bit about your journey to this place, because obviously you look. You're no one starts a game company like on their own. No one's like a writer or puts together such like a creative story out of nowhere. Like, what is your experience in the games? And like, what was the moment that you were like, I have a story to tell. I want to tell this story. And yeah, like, what's that like?
You're completely right in that it was very much not alone. Son, I'm gonna bring them up a lot because
Sure.
they're like the other half of my brain cell. That's like we split it down the middle. So we sort of initially came up with the concept because it was a part of one of Sun's stories that they kind of were picking at in a very small way back in, I believe, 2017, 2018. And we were sort of friends, loose acquaintances then. But we were, number one, we were a lot younger. And also, we were one of the few other writers that the other knew that were also interested in games. Sun more than me, I come from a very specifically literary and prose writing background. I currently am a writer. I'm a graphic novelist as well on the side. So I wasn't necessarily coming at it with the idea of like, I want to make games for sure, first and foremost. But sort of on a lark almost, Sun was in an airport and called me up at I think like 9 or 10 at night and was like, "Hey, do you want to make a game studio with me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. How bad could it be?" And here we are.
And then you learned.
And you learned. But that being said, I really didn't have a ton of games writing experience before starting Love Shore and before starting Perfect Garbage with Sunny. I'm not shy about that. I think it's important, specifically for writers and games writers included, to go outside of their genre, go outside of the media that they're into, and be sort of as omnivorous as possible. And I think that means not only consuming a lot of different types of media and also trying out to write different types of media. Since then, I have learned a lot. Not everything, not even like 5% of what I need to know to be like a really great games writer, but I like to think that I'm like learning all the time still. So it's been a process.
I think that's amazing. Like it is the fact that you're coming sort of like sideways into this world where you are so story focused, but yet like you are starting to understand like how like games interactive, how people make choices and how to make those choices meaningful within games. In the world building, you can easily tell like there is some love and there's some passion within like the characters, the world, even just the look itself. I think just says so much about this game. Getting into it, let's obviously as a writer, as someone who's out there who has this burning need to tell stories, like what feeds your soul? Like, what are some of the things that you go out there and you're like, what are some of the things that you consume that you think sort of like maybe builds into this game, or maybe even just sort of like keeps you going during those dark nights?
So many different things. And truly, the number one thing I would say is this is not like media, but being able to talk to other devs and to talk to the people in my studio first and foremost. In terms of that, that's sort of the number one thing when you do have those doubts as any kind of creator, writer or not. That's like the main thing is you cannot suffer alone. Even if you want to, even if you're like, oh, I gotta muscle through it. This is so hard. I have to like get good and like do better. You can't. You trust me. You can't. You will burn out. In sort of a different angle to that question, I'm not sure if you meant it in that way, but
no. I think that's. I think you're hitting it on the head. Like no one can go in this alone, and I think you've come at this like over and over again. It's like, look, I'm not the only one that's on here. I'm not the only writer. I'm not the only one who's doing all this. But you are also a part of the process. And I want to like shine a light on you for right now, where it's you are already listening to other people. Like you are diving in deep into the world of games, of writing in this interactive sort of this world that is very different than, you say you're working on a graphic novel. It's like obviously in the graphic novel, like the hero is going to do X, Y, and Z. While in this game, like it's you kind of have to like put your paths together. You have to like throw your post-it notes up and be like, okay, how do we get someone from like point A to point L where, it's attractive or it makes sense, or like that's what I would do if I was this character. So, for that, like what obviously as a writer, like what has inspired you? What is like sort of like brought you into this world where it's like I got a story to tell?
I think that mainly the main caveat to me talking about myself as a writer is that I'm a genre writer first and foremost. I pretty much exclusively work in sort of the speculative fiction like landscape, most particularly in horror and fantasy. I have a horror novel on submission. My first graphic novel is a satanic panic horror novel. So I come at a lot of things from sort of the scary or thrillery lens. So what really feeds me is a lot of like horror cinema, a lot of games that really sort of shake you or jar you in that kind of way. Books and comics that sort of get that emotional feeling out of you. It's something I think about a lot in terms of both comedy and horror being very like sensory bodily emotions. And so I'm kind of, as a creator, I'm chasing that high that my favorite things have given me. And that sort of emotive reaction that can come from story. So like one of the more interesting things that I have been sort of like playing recently that I was behind the 8 ball on is Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh.
A great game. I know. I never played it at the time. I was not a gamer. I did not grow up with games.
No, it's fine.
There are moments in that game that really jar you and surprise you, obviously. And this is going to sound like very much given stuff because everyone played that game but me, apparently. But, like, it's not a horror game, but there's still, like, very scary moments. There's still things that really sort of shake you and really make you consider your role in the world of that game. That kind of thing, obviously, it's a very different game than what we're making. Oh god, if we had Rockstar budget. But like, we try and bring a little bit of that like sort of cinematic sensibility into our very indie games. Like, we really want to bring in a sense of the literary and a sense of, really broad story that people can get invested in and get lost in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Obviously, you practically had to go into a crash course of like working in the games. What are some of the lessons that you learned while having to write for a game versus writing comic books, prose, film, anything like that that you previously have done?
There's so many things. I really think the main thing, and this is a lesson I've learned from games, but has been applicable so many other places, is to not be precious just because you've already sunk time into something. Like, the sunk cost fallacy will get you every time. It will make you think that what you've written is better than it is. It will make you waste time on something just because you've already wasted more time on it. Just taking the ability and specifically working in a game studio in general gives you that ability or that opportunity to really honestly look at, okay, is this relevant right now? Is this going to be what is needed for the game? Is this what's going to be needed for the team? And it sort of forced me as a writer to really take a hard look at like what each piece of my writing is doing, right? Everything has to be moving the story forward in really interesting and good ways, because there's a financial cost attached to all of my words, right? In a script, like, there's assets to be made from what I've written. There's music that's going to have to be made from, a scene change or something like that. So really just that consciousness of the need to like slim down and be realistic with what you're making is like the main thing I've learned. That's been a switch from like novel writing, where it's like it's just me at my desk. I can kind of do whatever I want. That's been the main thing, I think.
So to touch back on the relationship part of this game, what makes for a good relationship story?
They're about to say good relationship, and I'm like, damn, I don't know. I think a good relationship story is one where I think people tend to think about love and romance in stories and in games as one of, these characters are compatible or they get along well, but that is not it. Conflict is what drives good romance. The ability to have two characters go through something, either against each other or together, and experience conflict together and see sort of what they do to help each other through it, or how their personalities sort of intermingle in that conflict, is what's going to make your romance interesting. It's really easy to write boring romance. It's really hard to write romance that'll keep people clicking through paragraphs and paragraphs of text for like 4 hours. That's it. And what'll get you there is conflict, and not being afraid to like throw your characters in really tense situations. And if you are world building correctly, and if you're building up those characters' personalities in a really three-dimensional way, you'll be able to think, oh, okay, this character will react in this way, but this character will react in this way, and that's interesting, right? A lot of the pairings that we have in Love Shore for like the companions, one of them is a character, and I won't say who, whose goals are at exact opposite ends with the player character.
Oh.
And you sort of come to find that out through the whole process of playing the game. There's others where, I'll say it's not a spoiler, but like Talia and Farah are best friends, and you're sort of navigating an external conflict because they get along really well already. So yeah, just not being afraid of conflict is like the number one key for me.
Obviously, like this, like I said, like this has been at events. This is demos out. Like, what has been sort of the feedback that you've gotten from the audience who've actually like gotten their hands on this? Like, what is it like to have your game sort of not quite out into the wild as of just yet, but people are getting sort of like a quick taste, or like you're getting a little bit of feedback? Like, what are you hearing from people?
The main thing that we've been hearing a lot, which is fantastic, because we, just for folks who might not know, Love Shore was initially kickstarted back in 2019. Oh God, what year was it? A few years ago.
The before times, yes.
The before times, yeah, definitely.
Yes,
at a time where we could go to PAX.
Yes.
But it was kickstarted back in the day. And so even from jump, with the Kickstarter, we had a short demo out with it. So from the moment that people knew about the game, they were able to play a demo, which was like the first, day of the game, the first chapter, I guess. And we were getting feedback immediately about like, oh, like this dialogue was great. I really like this, or there's this bug that I came across. So we haven't had like open beta testing the whole way. We've kind of had a soft beta test going for years at this point, because not only that, we have offered the demo up on itch.io. We have a huge new base on TikTok, actually, that is just now sort of finding the demo for the first time. And so we're getting a whole new wave of feedback.
Oh, wow.
And people talking about it, which is really interesting and great. It's hard to quantify exactly what people have been saying, because it's been like such a broad span of time that people have been able to play the demo. But, people tend to really get attached to the characters, which is, standard for any kind of narrative-heavy game like that. But people also really are obsessed with the art, as they should be. We have a stable of artists, and they're all wonderful. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's been a lot of great feedback about the music and the sound as well. Our sound designer has done incredible work. Frankly, it's been a lot of great feedback about everything.
Obviously, we've sort of like talked about this as being a visual novel, but like this is more than just a visual novel. Actually, visual novels are more than just like what people think about them. Like, what are some of like the stereotypes that people have about visual novels that are just not true, or that you're trying to change with this game?
We really... There are a lot of really sort of toxic stereotypes that come out of, frankly, misogyny about visual novels, and about loosely like some adjacently homophobic ideas about visual novels, that like, oh, it's just like kissing games are for girls, or like, oh, it's just like a queer game, so it's like, baseline, not going to be interesting or whatever. Those kind of negative stereotypes are something that, number one, are really grating to hear, but number two, you as a developer can't really pay attention to, because if somebody's going to have these sort of baseline shitty, like prejudicial thoughts about a whole genre of games, you're not going to like the game that we're making anyway. We aren't in the business of converting people into liking VNs per se. That's not necessarily our goal. We sincerely hope, and we know that people who don't just play visual novels will like the game, because frankly, we have a lot of RPG mechanics in there as well. We have a whole stat system that is like, and as well as an approval system to mitigate those branching choices. There's a lot of different mechanics. We have a working cell phone in game that you can use. There's like a texting mechanic. There's a lot of other interesting things that we've kind of brought in to add to the mechanical experience to make it different than other VNs. But that being said, we don't shy away from it either, because I think that the stereotype about visual novels is that they're not real games, or not interesting to play, which you can think that.
But you're wrong.
But you're wrong. But dumb. And it's like, we understand as well that it's not going to be for everybody. If you're not prepared to read something, then I can't make you enjoy reading. I can't do that. But what we can do is make a really gorgeous game that you will want to play, and then you will be suckered into reading. So that's sort of the angle that we attack it from.
I love it. Yeah, I think, look, visual novels are highly overlooked. There are so many different stories, so many different ways that people can get into it. And the fact that you're doing so much in this game, that I think sort of that will reach out to a lot of people, because you're bringing in like the different characters, you're bringing in the mystery, you're bringing in the romance, you're bringing in like the bits and pieces. Play what you will, play how you will, and it feels it feels meatier. It feels like there's this world that you're out there exploring. And honestly, don't like walking place to place. This game, don't have to worry about it. So obviously, there's a lot of people who are looking to get into games. A lot of people who are just now starting to discover the different stories that you can tell within video games. What is a piece of advice that you would give to someone who's looking to get into games now or to get into visual novel writing like you have?
I think there's different stripes of advice for if you want to just get into games versus if you want to be a games writer.
Sure.
And I can sort of go into both. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No. Like, let's go into games writing, because I feel like games writing is often overlooked as this thing that people do like later on to fill in those bubbles at the very bottom, or that Toad says that the princess is in another castle. And the fact is that games writing now is legitimate. It's game design. It's like the whole thing in there. Like, a games writer is a game designer, is a games maker, is a part of the team. So if you want to be a games writer, what would you say?
Specifically, I would say play as many different types of games as you can. That goes for a lot of areas of game design, but I think for writers, it's exceptionally relevant. Because if you are hired onto a, like, I don't know, say a beat 'em up brawler type, where you're just going to be writing barks and a few interstitials, but you are really only into like RPG in-depth, like multi-choice narratives, you're not going to have the tools or the awareness of like the game that you're supposed to be making in that genre. Being genre aware of different projects and different styles of writing in these different types of games is what allows you to follow those rules so you can break them in smart ways. This is, again, probably is, cross applicable to other areas of game design as well, but I think specifically for writers, like, your barks can't be too long. Like, you can't be writing really cliched one-liners if you're trying to make an in-depth, like, fantasy role-playing experience. Like, there's genre conventions that you're going to want to break as a writer, because a lot of writers get bored very easily, I find. We love to entertain others so we can entertain ourselves. But like, the way that you can do that in a way that's still consumable by a player and still interesting to a player who wants to play that brawler beat 'em up style game is you have to know what you're working with first, right? It's just knowing your materials. And in terms of making like a portfolio or making something to submit to studios, be again broad-ranging in the kind of dialogue and stuff that you write or put into your portfolio. Someone might see your inventory descriptions and item descriptions and say this is not what we're looking for, but they might love the way that you write barks or specific like character dialogue. There's different roles, especially in larger like AAA studios. There's a lot of different roles to fill in terms of game writing. In indie, it's definitely a different story because there's only going to be one, maybe two writers on a project if you're very lucky, if there's any designated writers at all. And so that's a bit of a different situation. But like if you were applying to studios, just having as many of your own like tools on display as possible as well is the big piece of advice I'd give to people.
I love it. That's fantastic. Obviously, everyone should at this point want to get their hands on this finished game. When is it coming out?
Love Shore comes out October 21st, 2022.
That's
coming up.
That's coming up. Are you excited?
I'm very scared. Very excited. Very much excited. It's going to be great.
That's fantastic. And if people want to follow you, your journey through the narrative design process or anything like that, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so you can find this studio on Twitter mainly, which is at Perfect Garbo, like the shortened version of garbage. And then I'm also, unfortunately, terminally on Twitter at underscore Emnays, EMNAYS on Twitter. On Instagram, my handle is the same. Yeah, that's where you can locate me. Oh, and my website is just my name, emmettthehill.com.
Well, thank you so much. Again, looking forward to seeing this game. It's absolutely wonderful. I think the both the world, the characters, just the design, just screams to be played. So this is definitely a game that everyone should look forward to. And with that, I'll send everyone off to hopefully the next wonderful thing to watch on the GGP stream. So see you around.
Thanks.